Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. Why did you quit your job right away? Part 3. A logistics company hired me about 5 years ago. The business model was meant to be a management company for trucking companies that are privately owned. Allow men who own their own trucks to enjoy all the perks of working for a big company while still being their own bosses. My main job was to answer the phones, check the truck's routes, and find cheap gas stations for them. The FBI, DOT, USPS, and local police all showed up one day with a search warrant for the business. The owners were afraid that an angry driver might do something one day, so we kept the door locked and put a camera on the front door. When the doorbell rings, the alphabet soup runs through it wearing bulletproof vests and yells for everybody to stay seated and put their hands up. It was all I could think about how short the lead FBI agent was. She was really about 5 foot. We were all lined up against a wall and given a nice pat down. After that, we had to wait for about an hour while they went through the small office. To make things even more interesting, the owners of the startup convinced us all to bring our own laptops to work on. The FBI can have those until they make copies of everything on them. It turned out that the business wasn't really a startup after all. There was an imminent hazard order from the DOT, and the owners had owned a trucking company before. The DOT basically told them they could never own a trucking company again because their business was so unsafe. This way of managing was a way for them to get around it. A lot of the drivers thought they worked directly for the company and didn't even know they were driving trucks in their own names. Several of us left after the clash. Not long ago, I learned that the owners ran their business until early 2017. After that, they were charged with fraud and wire fraud. They pled guilty, and one of them is serving a couple of years in prison. I was 27 years old and working full-time for a consulting company that did software development professional services. It was only my second job after college. I was the 8th worker. I got a profit share for any hours I worked over 40 as part of my job. Within 2 months of starting the business, I was traveling across the country and around the world to provide on-site software development and integration services. Because of this, I consistently worked more than 60 hours a week. In that same year, I got married, bought a house, and lived from paycheck to paycheck. The bonus money from my first 6 months review was very important to me. After that, the reasons why started to come. The first 2 weeks went by, then 3 weeks, and finally 2 weeks. At this point, the .com era was just getting started, and recruiters were calling my phone a lot to try to get me to leave. I had enough, so I applied for and got another job. When I got to work, I gave my resignation to the business owner. He knew what it said without reading it and asked if there was any way I could stay on. To his surprise, I told him that there wasn't and that it was mostly because my bonus was late. Soon after, I went back to my cubicle to turn in my 2-week notice. My manager, whom I hadn't seen in 2 weeks, stopped by and told me that he had heard I was leaving the company and that the least they could do was finish my review. When we met in a conference room, he handed me a 2-page document with 20 different evaluation criteria, each marked on a scale from 1 to 5. This made a possible 100-point evaluation. He said that an employee had to get a score of 70 in order to be eligible for the profit-sharing program. For every point over 70, the amount of cash they would get would go up. Based on my math, I thought I was getting between $3,000 and $5,000. Guess what I got as a score? It's right to say 69. Going back to my cube made me feel nothing, so I didn't say anything. When I got home from work, I felt so down about everything. I was newly married and trying to take care of and protect my bride, but I failed. I shed tears. I then went in the next morning with a box in my hand, ready to quit right away. When I got to the building door, my manager was there to greet me. I told him I was leaving right away while looking at my box and would be right back to get my things. Then he told me I couldn't quit because I had been fired for stealing company property. He then locked the door and put his hand through the glass for 1 second. After that, I heard everything on my desk being thrown into a box. As I walked to the car to put my box back in it, my boss opened the door and threw my stuff out into the path. When I got close to the box and looked down, I saw my bride's picture in a broken picture frame. That morning, on the way home, I swore I would never work for anyone else again, and I never did. I often think about where my manager is and how great it would be to tell him that company sent me on a journey to start not one, but 2 very successful professional service businesses, with the second one making me a millionaire by the time I was 38. Booyah! Not all at once, but over the course of 2 or 3 weeks. I was hired as a cleaner by a small business owned by a family that also did gardening. While the husband and his team worked outside, I worked with a wife inside. They were really nice, but they were terrible at running a business. I was hired on Monday and asked to start working on Tuesday, but I didn't have any paperwork signed yet. I was told to meet one of the managers at a coffee shop. She would then drive us to work for an hour at a client's house before taking us to a bond claim. It took 45 minutes to an hour longer than planned because the manager was 30 minutes late. Most of the day went smoothly, and I got my work done. However, I was told at the end of the day that I would only be paid for the hours they approved, which were 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. I worked from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I was told to finish up at the house we had been working on the day before, so I went back on Wednesday. But no one was there, and I didn't have the keys. I hung out for about an hour and then left at 8 a.m. to go home. Around 11 a.m., my boss's husband called to say sorry and ask if I could help him do another bond clean in the city next door. I agreed, and he told me he had to leave 10 minutes after getting there. He told me that by 3 p.m. I had to clean a 3-bedroom house by myself, including the garden. For me, it was already 12:30 p.m. when I got there. The next day, I called them and told them I was going to be late. For the next 2 weeks, I had to keep calling them to get paid for my work and get them to sign papers for me. It turned out that the manager who was late on my first day often went to my mom's workplace and told her that they had lost 3 new hires in the first week and another 5 after me because they weren't getting paid enough or being given work they couldn't finish in time. The business closed a little over a month after I left. They couldn't keep employees, and the work they promised was too much for a team of 2. When was your F this HOA moment? Part 3. When I first moved in, I was a noisy neighbor. A lot of my friends are loud and like to drink and listen to loud music when they come over. One night, when we were being loud during quiet times, someone complained to me about the noise. I said I was sorry for breaking the rules and turned down the volume. After a few weeks, I get another noise complaint for playing loud music, even though it wasn't quiet hours. They couldn't give me a clear answer when I asked what the point of quiet hours was if I could still file a noise complaint outside of those hours. I did what they asked anyways and started lowering the volume on my sound system. Now it's been a month and I got another noise complaint. People say that at 4:30 a.m., loud music and voices from the unit woke up the people above them in the middle of the night. What's wrong? I was at a furry convention 200 miles away, so my unit was locked up and empty. Only my parents have a spare key. I tried to explain this to both the neighbor and the president of the board, but they laughed it off by saying things like, adjusting to loft living can be difficult, and this is not a dormitory. This was because they already thought of me as the noisy guy and the youngest homeowner in the building. I sent them both a follow-up email to remind them that I have photo-tagged, time-stamped, and location-tagged tweets as proof that I was in a different state over the weekend. I also told them that if they were to file another noise complaint, they better have proof, or I would not hesitate to hire a lawyer to fight any fines they give me. But this does raise the question, would a photo of me in a fursuit hold up in court? It's possible to lose your HOA-covered home in California if you owe just a few $100s. Not thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of dollars. In case you don't pay your dues, they can put a lien on your home and foreclose on it. Before the housing bubble burst, I had a strange event happen where my bank sent my monthly payments on time. A note from Hudson Management, the property management company, said they had not received the payment. Well, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck, and that was happening on its own. I thought it was strange. The payment was sent, as I saw when I checked with my bank. They asked if it was real, and I told them to call my bank when they were sure. They didn't. The payment to the HOA goes back into my account after 90 days because the check was never cashed. Now, fast forward a few months to the end of the housing market. My bank was sold to another bank, and all of my automatic payments went with it. My auto pay stuff is gone. I didn't know this, but my HOA and other bills are no longer being paid. Once I realized what was wrong, I set up all of my auto payments again, but the HOA missed 3 payments because they didn't save the check. Because I only owed them a few $100s, they put me in collections and sent me a letter threatening to take back my house. I was more than willing to pay them. The collection agency charges a fee for processing, which makes my less than $1,000 go up over $3,000. I go to the HOA meeting and explain what's going on. I show them the papers, including the bank statement that shows the money they were supposed to cash but didn't, and I tell them that the bank is being sold. I was asked to leave after making my case. They told me I had to pay everything, even the fees for the collection agency. F those effers in their stupid a-holes. The neighborhood where my parents live has a gate and the tiniest little guard station right at the gate. There hasn't been a guard there in more than 10 years. It's not a big deal, though, because nothing important ever happens there. People who live in gated communities used to think everything was safe, but in the last couple of years, they've started leaving their car doors unlocked and parking in their driveways. Someone's laptop was stolen from their truck, and this is shared on the community Facebook page. People are really upset about this, but the owner should be blamed for not locking his car and leaving that in it in the first place. Okay, fine. Anyway, this makes other people bring up the stupid kids who drive their families' golf carts around the neighborhood. We don't live near a golf course. They just have them, I guess. These kids aren't old enough to drive, and I'd say a good number of them are younger than 10 years old. The kids are not stopping at stop signs and are running on grass, among other things. Also, they start yelling about how people who don't live in the neighborhood are using the neighborhood pool, and by the way, it's mostly their kids' friends, which is kinda racist. In the end, the HOA tries to get a guard back into the guardhouse. It was a huge S-storm, and this would add about $1,000 to the neighborhood's yearly fees. After that, all I remember is my parents going to an HOA meeting at the library in a small room that wasn't big enough for everyone. After a month or two, no one talked about it anymore, and there's no guard in the guardhouse, so I guess that's a good thing. To sum it up, windows. I plan to rent out the house I inherited from my dad in the middle of 2011. The house was in Illinois, but I was in New York. I couldn't live there, but I might be able to rent it out and make some money. The bills still had to be paid, like the property tax, the water bill, the electric bill, and so on. So I found someone to rent the place. A company was taking care of it, and everything was going well until my tenants saw mold. Right away, I said, have the management company come look at the problem. They had someone come out, and sure enough, it was mold in the wall from the wet attic and windows that gave in to the mold. Drainage channels that are built into the windows are supposed to keep rain from getting into your effing house. However, during a particularly cold winter in Illinois, these channels froze and cracked, leaving a big hole that let water into the walls. Those windows are awful. It's HOA time! I thought they would be able to help me with my problem since they were in charge of the outside of the property. Not true, effer! Like the paths in front of the house or the driveways that lead to the garage, windows are not a common area thing. Not at all, sir. In the HOA agreement, windows are a very vague subject that are neither covered nor not covered. The woman at the HOA that I was arguing with would tell you no, it's not their job. Which other group does not cover it? That's right, insurance. That's why I have to fight this woman at the HOA over these windows. I sent in a form for alterations and additions that I signed before I learned that my insurance wouldn't cover windows. Now the bottom has dropped out from under me. In the end, my insurance paid for the mold damage repair, gutting, treating, and rebuilding the whole living room. The HOA agreed to pay for half of the new siding around the window while they fixed the roof. I will pay for any repairs that need to be done in the future. I threw away the house and didn't look back. HOAs. If you want to watch the part 2, click the link here. We're very, very glad to see you all in the comments again. Many thanks for your support.